All right, Nick, let's talk about the South Carolina Gamecocks. I think we see this time of year, NFL Combine, NFL Draft is going on. It's kind of a way to see the talent that these teams have cultivated and made throughout the season. How good are they? How are they stacking up against other teams in college football? Are they able to recruit and then develop top tier recruits? And the latest news out of South Carolina is very surprising to say the least. I don't think a lot of people would expect this, but South Carolina looking really, really good. We'll get into that in just a second, but before we do, I'm Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I allude to, South Carolina Gamecocks looking really good when it comes to the recruits they have been able to develop and what kind of, calls to the NFL ranks they are getting. Let's get into the article and we can talk more about it on the other side. This, of course, is over on SI.com. It says, the South Carolina Gamecocks are making waves in the 2025 NFL draft cycle with a historic showing at the NFL Combine. The Gamecocks are sending 11 players to this year's event, marking the fifth most players from any school and tying second most in the SEC. That's incredible for the Gamecocks. This is a remarkable achievement, highlights the growth and talent within South Carolina football, signaling a bright future for the program. I completely agree. I'm really excited about this news for the Gamecocks. I think it shows they are doing something really, really right here. I know you have some thoughts on this, Nick, but before we get to you, Gamecocks fans, in the comment section below, we're talking about guys that are leaving the school. We're going to go to the NFL. There's a lot of names on the list, but if you go through the list, I want you to let us know in the comment section below, who is your favorite player coming into the draft for the Gamecocks from this year? There's a lot of really great options, a lot of notable guys, maybe some newer guys as well that transferred but did a really great showing on this team. But let us know in the comments below, of all the guys going to the draft this year, which one was your favorite in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what do you think about this latest news for the Gamecocks?
I think it highlights an incredible move and an incredible job done by head coach Shane Beamer, and the direction the South Carolina Gamecocks program is going. And look, the report kind of was a little bit of a misnomer. I'll say a little bit because they don't count Texas as one of an SEC school in their analysis, right? So Texas and Georgia are technically ahead with more invitees than South Carolina. South Carolina tied with Ole Miss, but that doesn't ignore the fact that South Carolina is chugging out a lot of NFL talent. They've got more guys to go into the combine than just going down the list here than Alabama, than Florida, right? These are two traditional SEC blue blood programs, more than Tennessee, right? More than LSU, right? This is where South Carolina is in terms of accumulating talent. And like it or not, football still is predicated, when it comes to winning anyway, on having more talent than the other guy, having a great culture, having the great X's and O's, having good leadership, right? That matters too, but the biggest determining factor is having better players, right? It's still obvious. People like to ignore the facts sometimes, but 90% of the time, if you have better players, you're going to win. And South Carolina is starting to be one of those better players organizations in the SEC, and I think that's a great sign for them going forward. And the reality is, ever since Steve Spurrier left, South Carolina has struggled to keep consistent top-flight talent in this program or accumulate it at all. There's been moments and there's been players here and there, but to have enough guys to compete basically on the same level as Alabama, better than Alabama, as right behind Texas and Georgia, would have been unheard of 2 or 3 or 4 years ago looking at the South Carolina program. Now it's exactly where they are. And I think it's going to send shockwaves through the SEC because it's perfectly acceptable in the minds of most SEC teams for Texas to have a lot of great players, talent. Georgia, a lot of great talented players. LSU, Alabama, right? It's even acceptable for Ole Miss too, because Lane Kiffin's Lane Kiffin. Now, he can never rise to the top, but they can have some good guys. It's going to completely blow everyone's minds when South Carolina starts and maintains accumulating more and more talent to the top levels of the SEC, because they're not supposed to have that, right? Even when Steve Spurrier was there, a lot of people were like, well, it's the Florida guy, it's the old ball coach, they can be good, right? Just because he's there for a few years. This is going to completely upset the apple cart. We're going to see just a massive sea change in the SEC because the Tennessees of the world, even programs like Georgia, Florida, right? You look at Mississippi State, Auburn, Texas A&M, Missouri. These guys are just not going to know what they're not going to know what to do in this new SEC. And if Georgia starts losing or having to battle regularly with South Carolina, they're going to be in trouble too. We're in the middle of a massive change in the Southeastern Conference, and a big part of that is South Carolina's massive spike in talent, and it looks sustainable. They've made some great moves already this offseason as well, and they got an uber talented quarterback that everyone is well aware of too. This South Carolina program is in an upward trajectory. There's a lot of question marks about Beamer coming into the 2024 season. Now the future looks incredibly bright in Columbia.
Yeah, Nick, and I think you look around this team, you look at what is going on with the South Carolina Gamecocks. This is something that really, under even Spurrier, hasn't really happened before. This is a team that people are probably scared to come up against and play. And you talk about metrics of what makes a team good. I think when you see this, this is the first sign of sustained dominance for the South Carolina Gamecocks as far as you have to keep the good players to be able to send them to the NFL. So now we're seeing, like last year, Carolina had a bunch of great players. You talk about the Marshawn Lloyds, you talk about the Jaheim Bells, but they weren't able to retain those guys. Those guys went to different programs. They went to Florida State, they went to Southern Cal, then those guys went to the NFL. Those are great NFL caliber players developed by South Carolina, but they weren't able to keep them on the roster. Flip to this year, now they've got guys that they're keeping. They've got guys that they've developed throughout their entire careers, local guys. Tonka Hemingway, a great defensive tackle. They've got a transfer they brought in, Raheem Rocket Sanders, that looks really, really talented at the running back position. He's looking really good. Numerous other players on this roster. We're seeing South Carolina is now sending guys to the NFL. It's so many this time because they were able to retain them. They weren't overtaken by other schools around the league. They're keeping their top talent. I think this is a first sign to see South Carolina start to walk itself up, start to then potentially compete for SEC titles, compete for college football playoff opportunities. I think this is a team that is on a major upswing, and this is the first sign that if you have the talent on your team still to be able to send to the NFL, it shows you can keep the high-level talent, and you're looking really, really good for the future. Hats off to Shane Beamer and co. I really like what's going on this team. If I'm a Gamecocks fan, I am very excited about the future for this program.